When our dear friends in the woke community first sat down and began the important process of dreaming up a new religion, they missed out a few crucial bits. But let's not start on a negative. Let's take some time to compliment them on some of their successes. For example, you have to take your hat off to them as to how clever they are at using minority groups to further their blessed calling of the spreading of the hate. Method being simple: find a minority group who may or may not feel oppressed and start to speak loudly on their behalf about how oppressed they actually are. For example, black people. Lump them all in together and start saying that no one thinks that their lives matter at all, regardless of whether they're multimillionaires or living on the street. The lives of all black people don't matter at all to anyone anymore. Discussion over. Fill people's heads with some half-baked statistics, or failing that, some outright lies, to prove that just leaving the house will put them in mortal danger. Get an endorsement from a few billionaire people of colour. Job done. Minority group marginalised. Society divided. Direct racists left to run amok, whilst the rest of us are wandering around looking for something called systemic racism down the back of the sofa. Don't listen to Shelby Steele, Thomas Sowell, Tony Sewell, Kemi Badenoch, or even Morgan Freeman. Listen to the wild mutterings of Nancy Pelosi instead.
Thank you, George Floyd, for sacrificing your life for justice.
Is she not saying, thank you, George Floyd, for letting us use your tragic death as to further the progressive agenda? Anyway, I'll leave that one up to you. Once the BLM drum has slowly receded to become a hum of background noise and all the screens on Instagram have been turned from black to pictures of lunches again, the wokeists move on to the next chapter in the Holy Book, the Book of Trans, verse 1. Similar method, different target. Find some adults who've been quietly getting on with their lives, living as if they're the opposite sex, and start advocating for them. Screech loudly on their behalf, whether they like it or not, and then say that there just aren't enough of them, that their lives don't matter either. Lump them all together with anyone else who isn't heterosexual into a nice little alphabet soup, deny them an individual voice, lob them in a couple of holy months, chest binders, when they're old enough, say 9 years old, send them off to the Tavistock for some puberty blockers, and fingers crossed they don't get osteoporosis or are infertile by puberty. Trans kids' lives matter. Men in dresses in women's safe spaces, society divided, well played. The fact that most of us couldn't care less how grown adults choose to live their lives doesn't matter, and it's just a sign of our own internalised transphobia. So we are all dutifully wandering off to look for our internalised transphobia down the back of the sofa. Shush, Kira Bell. Shh, Richie Herron and others. Black trans kids' lives matter. Thanks for letting us use your childhood confusion and vulnerability to further the progressive agenda. But one of my real faves is the climate game. Convincing everybody that the sun monster is angry and therefore we are all going to have to eat locusts moving forward, never get in a car, freeze and or starve to death in order to appease the sun monster's great rage. It's sort of like a modern version of the Aztecs spending the day sacrificing thousands of people because they had less than an ideal harvest that year. There must be zero carbon! But carbon is what the trees eat. No! We need zero of the carbon! The sun monster is angry! The list goes on and on. I would indeed put a few quid in the Church of England, dispensing with that silly little cross representing the sacrifice of Jesus Christ and replacing it instead with a progressive migraine-inducing flag adorning the altar in every single church over the next few years, as we listen in compelled silence to sermons from Bingo, who uses they-them pronouns about how God didn't really make them man and woman. You can ignore that bit of the Bible. These are indeed great successes in spreading of the hate. But I must say, as is my duty, as an Ofcom compliant person of pinkness, I must point out where the creators of the woke religion missed a few important bits in making a really, really good religion. Most importantly, they forgot to invent a God, which creates some pretty tricky conversations around what happens when the wokist shuffles off their mortal coil and goes for the long sleep. With no promise of heaven or an afterlife, there's no hope of something more tantalising than the hardships of their actual life. Their solution comes in the form of that favourite woke word, zero. If we can have net zero, why can't we have zero death? There are going to be a few challenges, but if you stay in your house, unless absolutely necessary, never see a foreign sunset ever again, never breathe near anyone ever again, shuttle the schools, don't see your family, and are content with your loved ones dying alone in hospital, we can reach zero death. I mean, I know it's a bit of a shake-up compared with what you were used to, but we must all make sacrifices. Another disadvantage of the lack of forgiving God is when someone makes a mistake, as there is no forgiveness, repentance, or redemption in this woke religion. The wokey solution to this niggling problem is more simple. Just cancel absolutely everyone who doesn't agree with everything they say. Not massively great for social cohesion, freedom to think and speak, create art, challenge surging totalitarianism, but hey, that actually fits quite well with what the woke wants most in their sacred mission, the spreading of the hate.